Hi, my name is Becky Small, and I'm going to tell you a bit about the author Pam Munoz Ryan, a bit about her life, about her writing style, and about some of the books she's written. So, Pam was born in Bakersfield, California, and for most of her elementary school, her grandmother, who was originally from Mexico, lived right down the street. And so Pam would go to her grandmother's house and spend a lot of time with her before her parents got off of work. One of the things that Pam loved to do as a child was read, and so when she was at her grandma's house, her favorite thing to read there was her grandma's encyclopedia. But she also liked to ride her bike to the local library and checked out many books and read a ton when she was young. In junior high, she was the editor of her school newspaper, and in high school, her best subjects were composition and English. But for those junior high and high school years, she didn't really pursue writing that much. In her biography, where I got a lot of this biographical information from her website, she said that she was pretty much too busy being a teenager to really pour much into writing. She went to San Diego State University to become a teacher, and her first job right out of university was with the Red Cross. The Vietnam War had just ended, and so she was working with refugees in camps and in play schools and things like that. And then after that job, she worked for 3 years as a bilingual Head Start teacher in Escondido. And during that time, she got married and she began having a family. And so after her 3 years as the bilingual teacher, she took 12 years off just to take care of her kids. She had 4 kids, 2 girls and 2 boys. And then after those 12 years, when they were all old enough to be in elementary school, she started going back to school. I think she said night school. And she wanted to get her master's in post-secondary education. It was then, when it was about a week before she was going to graduate, that one of her professors encouraged her to pursue a career in writing. And as luck would have it, not very long after that, one of her colleagues from education approached her and asked her to join her on a writing project to write a book together. And since then, Pam has really embraced being a writer. She said that her first couple years had a lot of rejection. She sent in a lot of books that publishers just declined, but she got herself a literary agent, and then things took off. She mainly started with just picture books for children, but one of her editors at Scholastic, after quite a few successes with these picture books, encouraged her to start writing some novels, and so she gave that a try, and since then she's written many award-winning novels and more picture books too, but she definitely is a writer now, and she's loving it. She's been very influenced by her multicultural history. Her grandma, like I said, was from Mexico, and then also, her work with the Vietnamese refugees, and as a bilingual teacher. Most of her books, all of her books, I think, have kind of a multicultural feel. A lot of them are about Mexico and Mexican Americans and that culture, but not all of them. She incorporates a lot of other cultures too. Also, Pam is a woman, and so a lot of her books feature strong women protagonists and people who kind of defy social norms. So that's the things that Pam likes to write about. She uses very colorful and descriptive language, and a lot of her books, especially with the ones that have Mexican themes, have a bit of magical realism elements in it. She also, one thing I noticed is she likes to use reoccurring objects in stories to kind of to have deeper meaning, and they're kind of prominent objects. I know a lot of writers maybe use objects to have deeper meanings, but in one of the books that we read in class, Esperanza Rising, I really noticed the food she has. Each chapter is named after I guess maybe a fruit or vegetable or some kind of food, and is mentioned throughout that chapter. And it's really kind of symbolic of what's going on in that chapter, and and just the time lapse that's going on, and the themes of that chapter are really kind of symbolized in the fruit or vegetable that she chose to name each chapter after. Another book of hers that I read was Amelia and Eleanor, and it's about Amelia Earhart and Eleanor Roosevelt, who I didn't know this, but I guess they were close friends. And one of the reoccurring objects I saw in this was their clothes, and specifically their gloves. And they talk about how the long white gloves that they wear to dinner are so much different from Amelia's pilot gloves. And I guess Eleanor loved to drive a car, which many people thought was unsafe for women to be doing. And she had to, you wore gloves because they were not as enclosed as cars nowadays. And they mention that throughout the story. They make reference to the gloves, and I thought that was kind of symbolic of how these women kind of defied some gender norms and social society norms that they were supposed to conform to. So that's another example of the way she uses objects to symbolize deeper meaning in her writing. So now I'll talk about a couple more books. On my pamphlet poster thing, I have 8 books, and the ones on the left-hand side are some novels, and the ones on the right-hand side are some picture books. I think she has maybe more novels than picture books, but they seem pretty even. So I already talked about the top 2, so I'll talk a little bit about some of the other ones. The Dreamer is about a boy from Chile who has a very strong father, maybe a little bit, I think, a controlling father, and this boy is kind of a more sensitive, shy boy, and his father wants him to be tough and manly, and it's a coming-of-age story, and this boy, as he grows up, kind of finds his voice in writing and eventually in poetry, and he uses his poetry to speak about the ills of society that he sees. Freedom writing is a really interesting premise, has a really interesting premise. It's about a woman from the classic Western cowboy kind of times that lives her life as a man so that she can pursue her dreams. She becomes this famous stagecoach driver, which I guess means fighting off bandits and things like that. And I guess that somewhere in the middle of the book, she lives her life as a woman and marries a man, but I think a child dies and her husband dies, and she goes back to living as a man, and it's not until she dies that the people find out that she wasn't a man, that she was a woman, but in order to be who she wanted to be, she had to live her life as a man. Becoming Naomi Leon is about a Mexican-American girl living with her grandmother and her brother, and she's dealing with just fitting in socially, catching up academically, learning English, but then on top of that, her mother, who I think abandoned her 7 years before, comes back into her life, and she and her grandmother and her brother have to deal with that as well. Then going to the picture books, Nacho and Lolita is a story obviously for younger kids. I mean, I guess everybody likes picture books, but it's about 2 birds who become friends. And they're 2 different kinds of birds, and so it's kind of about how friendship and love can triumph over differences. And then also, one of the birds is a migratory bird, and they have to deal with separation and things like that, and how love can transcend distance as well. Mice and Beans is a play on rice and beans, but it's about a Mexican grandmother who is planning a birthday party for her granddaughter, and it uses the book to kind of talk about what the Mexican culture and what parties look like there, what they eat, what they wear, games they play, who they'd invite, and I think it's called Mice and Beans because part of the plot is them trying to not have mice come and eat the food and things like that. And then finally, When Marian Sang is a nonfiction book about this classical contralto singer Marian Anderson, who was, I think, a famous singer in the 50s and 60s and was involved in the civil rights movement. So this book kind of goes through her goes through some of her backstory in her life and talks about, again, a strong female lead who is fighting for equality and defying what society would tell her she is allowed to be. So that is Pam Munoz Ryan, and I hope this gives you a bit of a feeling for who she is and what her writing is like. And I hope to read more books by her, and I hope that you will read more books by her. All right, thanks.